Hey everyone, Mark here with North of the Wall Garage. Today we have a really special video. We're reviewing the 2025 Lincoln Navigator Reserve. So as I mentioned before, this particular model is the Reserve model, which is now the sort of standard trim with the Navigator. In 2024, the Navigator was available in three separate trims: Premier, Reserve, and Black Label. But I think Lincoln discovered, or at least had the data to know, that most people were opting for a Reserve or Black Label, so they just got rid of the Premier altogether. One of the great advantages to the Navigator, and frankly the Expedition as well, is that high output EcoBoost motor. Obviously it was very controversial when it first came out, when these trucks went away from the V8. Of course, GM counterparts, you can still get a V8, but really everything else this size has switched now to at least a twin turbo V6, so really GM is kind of the outlier there. But these twin turbo V6s are actually excellent engines. The EcoBoost has proven to be fairly reliable. The high output motor, it's basically the same one that's in the Ford Raptor. So it's got a lot of power. It's got over 500 torque. I think it's like 450 horsepower. So plenty of go for the heavy Navigator and the size of the Navigator.
Quick voiceover here for the wind noise. Wanted to start with the cons of the 2025 Navigator, especially since they have now condensed the various trim levels down to 2 from 3. So with just the Reserve and the Black Label trims available, this particular Reserve trim has an MSRP of $102,000. And the only option here that the owner selected is just the additional tri-coat white paint.
Beautiful flake to that, actually. So I think it was money well spent. It's an interesting white. It's dynamic in the light. It's not just flat. For a standard quote-unquote interior, which this is like the chocolate brown, it is stunning. And that's really always been kind of the Navigator claim to fame, is the interiors have been really exceptional. The swooping screens are really impressive and interesting when you're in the car and looking through the infotainment. And just the quality of the leather and the adjustments of the actual driver and passenger seats are really dynamic. I love the crystal volume knob. There's just so many nice touches here in terms of materials that I think really make this truck stand out, even against an Escalade or something similarly priced. But as I mentioned, now with the collapse of the trim levels down to 2 different levels, when you're going with the Reserve like this one, and frankly, I actually still think it's the way to go. But when you're going with the Reserve with this one, they did, I'll call it, decontent the Reserve a little bit. What I mean by that is in last year's model, again, the Reserve was kind of the middle tier model. Now it's the base model essentially, right? So for example, you have your door card, which this is all beautiful soft touch leather. And I actually love the door handle here. Very easy to actuate. It's a natural grip. And then once you get down to midway down the door card, you have a hard plastic. And that's really fine, right? All you're really doing here is just putting water bottles in this section or a little bit of storage. So who really cares? But nevertheless, the Reserve model and last year's generation was soft touch at this point. The other interesting thing on a $102,000 car is, unfortunately, you don't get any fog lights. So these headlights are amazing, and they have a really beautiful LED that lights up across. And the lighting package in general on this car is very impressive. But there are no fog lights, which if you're in inclement weather, for example, just blizzards or bad rainstorms, it's incredibly useful, or fog, I guess by definition, it's incredibly useful to have a good fog light. So in this case, I don't even think it's available on the Black Label. It's just not available on the Navigator. So interesting omission for a car that costs 6 figures. So behind the steering wheel in the 2025 Lincoln Navigator, now you have the fun square wheel. That's certainly something that would take some getting used to, but I think it's a fun and interesting design perspective just with the swooping screens. This was a choice they had to make. The screens are impressive, I'll be honest. This is very well designed, very interesting to look at, and it really makes the interior feel comprehensive. It doesn't feel stuck on. It feels like kind of a wall to the interior, and it kind of keeps everything in. A lot of interesting information you can display up there, and all the widgets are editable through the center screen. So plenty of videos covering that information, but just something to note again. The other thing, $102,000 car, there is no heads-up display. And part of the reason I think that's the case is because really this screen kind of functions as a heads-up display. Information is very far outside the driver's view. So typically with a normal car, your gauges are basically right behind the steering wheel right here. So when you're looking down, it's right in that window right here. You have all your information. But now that's up there, basically where a heads-up display would be. So that's why I didn't think they bothered with a heads-up display, since it's really in the same area. So your eyesight, your eye line, you're not looking down so much. You still have a picture of the road when you're looking at that information. But an interesting choice, and I think something that would take some getting used to if you own this car. The other thing, I just think from a daily usability perspective, I'm not a fan of the buttons to shift. GM has gotten away from this now in the 2025 Yukons, Tahoes, Escalades. They have a stock that you press similar to Mercedes or Tesla to shift the car into gear. Lincoln and Ford are still dealing with the buttons here. That's not my favorite thing in the world. Is it a huge issue? No, but again, if I'm buying this, that's something that would be a little bit of a detractor for me. And then the last thing, the Expedition has physical buttons or physical adjustments to the vents. To adjust them on the Navigator, you have to do it via the screen. It is pretty seamless and it's pretty quick when you go through an adjustment. And there's like little hacks where, okay, I just want it on my body, you just press that button. I want it away from my body, you just press that button. But if you're driving around, it's something you have to take your eyes off the road. You have to go and make the, it takes 2 clicks, right? So I'm home right now. That's the first click. And then the second click is me moving that vent around with my finger. And if you have to adjust 2 vents, it's several clicks. So something where I think it's very slick. You eliminate the amount of buttons on the center console and the dash ultimately. But from a daily driving perspective and usability perspective, that is something that's a negative. And ultimately you have to take your eyes off the road if you want to do climate adjustments, which in the summertime, if you want cold air on your face real quick while you're hot and sweaty, and then eventually you want to take it off, you might be making those adjustments several times. In the winter, it's probably less of an issue. But just, I think the only other kind of major con, I think, is that functionality for the vent system. Again, the Expedition, which is built on the exact same chassis and has the exact same powertrain at the highest models, has physical vents that you can adjust with your hands, kind of the conventional way. The other thing I think is worth mentioning on our channel, we like to cover a lot of different scenarios and a lot of different off-road technology through the various trucks that we review. So similar to the offerings of GM, you have an independent rear suspension as compared to a solid axle. As a result of that, you do have the low-hanging lower control arms. So the GM trucks have this as well. But it is something to note, if you're taking this on the sand or off-road, why you would do that with your $100,000 plus Navigator, I don't know. But I could absolutely see it. Deep snow, deep sand on the beach. People do use these things properly sometimes. You do have the kind of knuckles dragging, right? The lower control arms are there and pretty low to catch the independent rear suspension, obviously. If it was solid axle, they'd be able to tuck all that up. So that's kind of the low point of the vehicle back here. Love that the spare is included. It's basically a full-size spare. I don't think the wheel is full-size, but it's not a donut, for example. So love that that's included. But yes, definitely from an off-road perspective, just inclement weather, those lower control arms are dragging. But again, GM's happy to sell you basically the same idea, lower control arms dragging, on the Z71 Tahoe and the AT4 Yukon, which are billed as off-road vehicles. The Navigator is not billed as an off-road vehicle. That's something that is required for the independent rear suspension, which of course makes the ride more comfortable and is more luxurious experience inside from a ride quality perspective, but obviously that is a compromise off-road. Not to mention the redesign, so all of GM's flagship SUVs, the Yukon, the Tahoe, and the Escalade have been refreshed for 2025, similar to the Navigator. But as I talked about with reliability, the Navigator has that EcoBoost motor, which has turned out to be great. The GM 6.2, and really this is the reason why this owner didn't go for an Escalade or a Yukon, the 6.2 V8 has been extremely problematic. There's massive recall that's about to be underway. They really haven't traced the source of the issue yet. There's some theories as to cylinder deactivation, all sorts of other ideas out there as to why the 6.2s have been imploding. And that's not an issue you have to face on the Navigator. So huge plus there from a reliability perspective. You know that the engine in this is going to be solid. I can also speak on this point confidently because I know several 6.2 liter V8 owners and a couple who have been on their third motor now and are basically in recall hell with the 6.2s. So again, if I'm shopping this class, which I actually just did shop this class of vehicle, I'm staying away from the 6.2 liter. If you're really into GM, that's fine. They still have the diesel, they still have the 5.3, but stay away from the 6.2. And the EcoBoost motor and the Ford products are pretty good. Before we go for a drive, I will mention we have a 2022 Lincoln Navigator in the family, so the body style previous to this one that I've been mentioning. And we did have a once in 50 year blizzard in 2022 where that Navigator performed flawlessly, and that was a very severe situation with several feet of snow, roads blocked, trailers flipped, police cars were out of service. It was an insane storm. Again, it was once in 50 years, and the Navigator with snow tires did extremely well. got the driver out of a bad situation, went and helped on rescue situations to get other people stuck seriously inclement weather. So although maybe this truck doesn't have extreme off-road prowess, the reality is it's a big four-wheel drive truck and it's performed under pressure. It's a reliable powertrain. I wouldn't be too concerned about the ability for this truck to get you out of a bad situation. So now just mentioning, I think the things that really stand out to me on this truck that are, you know, great things. Obviously the exterior design is wonderful. It looks beautiful. It stands out on the road. It has an extreme presence on the road, not just based on size, but really it's a beautiful truck. Again, I noted that the option on this one with the paint and the metallic fleck in the white paint is exceptional. It looks great. The standard wheels look great, and they give it to you on good Michelin tires, so very happy to see that as well. Love the contrast. I think the interior is built incredibly well. The material selection in the interior, except for the door cards, right? Beautiful, soft touch everywhere. Just the hatch on the wood here, the little hatch grain, the different trims and the different colors, they all work together flawlessly. I think this is a beautiful truck on the inside. I like it better than the Escalade. I like it better than a lot of the higher end offerings. I just think it's a really, really well designed truck for the price, which again, not cheap, but it's beautiful. And also very kid friendly in the sense that you have kind of this nicer soft, but not leather back covering on the seats. I think that's very smart for what this truck is going to be used for, which in this case, there's 3 car seats in here. So keeps all the kind of footwear off your leather, and really nice USB-Cs right in the seats. And then the rear seats also get 2 USB-C ports. So very thoughtful interior from the perspective of passenger comfort, passenger usability, and everyday driving. All right, so now we have our demonstrators in the back seat. This passenger seat is set to about what I would ride in as a 6'1" person. So Connor has plenty of room there with his legs. He's comfortable. He's good to go back here. And then Maddie in the third row. Maddie, what do you like about being in the third row in the 2025 Lincoln Navigator?
I like how it's more bigger because the other car wasn't really big, and it has a nice walkway. And I like how I have like these buttons so I can go like back.
Yes. Oh, nice. You can recline your seat back there too. Oh, that's excellent. And I noticed, Maddie, you didn't even have to bend over when you were walking back to the third row. Is that right? Yeah, so the third row is really nice in this vehicle because you have a flat load floor, basically. There's no transmission tunnel to really get in your way. Lincoln did a great job of dropping that floor, so it's very easy to go from the second to third row, no problem. Thanks, Maddie and Connor.
You're welcome.
I also love the lighting of this vehicle. The owner was telling me the lighting is really spectacular at night, so we'll have to get it back for a night shoot at some point. But each of the individual letters light up when you're, locking the car at night. And this is all kind of behind the taillight glass. So the badge itself sits within the glass of the taillight, which is really cool, and I had not seen that before. So a really stunning kind of back quarter view here. So the other thing that Joe, the owner, pointed out to me is, of course, you have a 60-40 split like a normal third row perhaps, but you can also do the 40-20-40. So that middle row, as Joe will demonstrate, can be folded on its own, so you can run like skis through, for example. So that's awesome. So right there, if you have skis or anything else in the interior, you can still hold 6 full-size adults on this interior and run something really long through the center of the car. Okay, so ready to go in the 2025 Lincoln Navigator Reserve. As I covered before, you have the buttons to put the transmission into different gears. So just to go in reverse, foot on the brake, and to press the reverse button. That's it. One other thing to note, I know it looks a little funky in the camera here, is that the owner, Joe, just pointed this out to me, is that when you activate reverse, or obviously using any of the parking cameras, this car has a ton of cameras around, obviously it's a very large truck, the screen where you view the camera output is far away. So it's actually kind of small. If I'm sitting here in the driver's position and I start to back out as I normally would, that screen, because it's far away, reads a little smaller to me versus perhaps some of the GM trucks where you basically have the tablet right in front of you, it's in your face, that screen appears very large. So just one interesting thing to note, it's certainly still visible, it's a very clear picture. I can clearly see the 360 cam on the right and the backup camera on the left, but they are farther away than you would kind of expect. So one thing that sticks out to me right away is just how comfortable the ride is in the Navigator. And I guess you would expect that, right? It's a $100,000 truck, but ultimately it's body on frame, so you have to overcome that. And there's not actually air suspension on this vehicle. It's just super comfortable, and whatever tuning they did to the shocks, and ultimately I think the owner Joe was smart here to option it with the 22-inch wheels versus the 24s. I think the 24s, it's too big of a wheel, it's too heavy, and I think you would compromise ride quality. Whereas on the 22s, we're going over plenty of bumps, we're getting jostled on pavement, potholes, everything. It's super comfortable, and I honestly would say, granted, my S-Class is 10 years old, but it really does ride equivalent to my S-Class. Just an extremely comfortable ride. The seat's really supple, so you kind of get grabbed by the seat. It's not too hard of a surface, and just overall very impressed with the ride quality in the Navigator. From a tech standpoint, you do not get the video rear view mirror. So if you have the Navigator loaded totally up to the ceiling, obviously that's something you have to overcome. It is such a big vehicle though, and the cargo capacity is so significant, even behind the third row, where you'd really have to be fully loaded to get it to that point. It does have the roof rails, so you can run the roof box on top, so it's very easily avoidable, but just something from a technology packaging standpoint to point out. One other car, unfortunately I didn't film, but I did have a lot of time lately with 2025 Yukon AT4 Ultimate with the 6.2 liter V8. So now basically what GM has done is with the Ultimate trims, the Yukon and the AT4 Ultimate package is very similar to a Denali. There's really just leather options and wheel options that are different. But having said that, spending the time in that vehicle, the ride quality, even with a big tire on the AT4 Ultimate, that has 20-inch wheels, so the tires are significantly larger from a sidewall perspective than even this Navigator with the 22-inch wheels. The ride quality in the Navigator is simply better. And obviously, you know, some might point out, yeah, that might not be totally apples to apples as the GM competitor is the Escalade. Maybe, but those trucks are the exact same price, the Yukon and the Navigator Reserve. So I think it's a fair comparison, and plenty of people now actually prefer the Yukon because it's a little more stealth wealth than the Escalade. The Navigator rides extremely comfortably, certainly better than the Yukon. So as you would expect, the square wheel is interesting. Obviously, when you're going through a normal turn and just in normal driving where your hands sort of shift from the 9 to 3 position, it is kind of weird grabbing like a flat side of the wheel to manipulate the wheel through the turn. Though I suspect that's something you get used to like very easily. So one of those things where maybe the first couple weeks of having the car, it's a little bit strange, but perhaps similar to the Tesla yoke. Once you're an owner, you sort of get used to it and it's no big deal. Yeah, and it moves just fine. I'm kind of mid-throttle right now. You can easily feel the turbo spool up. The high-output EcoBoost is such an impressive engine. Keeps speed very, very well. It's more than enough power for a truck of this size, and I would have a lot of confidence driving this every single day. One thing I'm kind of glad that Ford and Lincoln hasn't gone away from is the keypad access. I find that highly convenient, and obviously now with all these trucks and cars, you can open them from the app. Obviously, of course, you have your key and wireless key. But I still find the keypad to be very utilitarian. You never know when you're in a weird situation, your phone's out of battery, you lost your key, whatever. You can still get into your truck, so I like that they still keep that even on the 2025 Lincoln Navigator. Other thing I love here is that Ford Lincoln, they've included the remote start on the fob itself. That's a really, really nice feature, as certain manufacturers now are kind of keeping this to app functionality or otherwise. It's really nice when you're in your house on a cold day or you're somewhere and you have a line of sight to the car, you can remote start it at any time right from the fob.
As always, really appreciate everyone's likes and subscriptions. They don't go unnoticed, and hope you enjoy these owner-derived reviews. I think it's an interesting angle when we actually get to talk to the folks that own these cars and find out what's going on with them, the good and the bad. So please stay tuned for many more reviews and more content on the way. Thanks again.